right, so the first thing you need to do is gather all of your supplies. I have some scissors, I have a seam ripper, I have a needle with some thread. I will actually be changing that color, but I wanted it bright so you could see it. And then I have my patches, and I've gone ahead and pinned them into place. You could also iron them into place. These have actually already been ironed, so they won't re-iron. But sometimes ironing them makes it a little easier because then you're not dealing with the pins, but either process works. And then what I will do first is show you how to machine sew. When you have a bunch of patches to sew on like I do here, that is the easiest way to go. So as you can see, my machine is already threaded. It's got brown thread in it since I'm working on the brownie vest. I did, however, use a different color bobbin, and you can see there it's green, so that if I do ever have to rip these patches off, I can turn it over to the other side and you'll be able to see the color on the back, which I will show you when I'm finished. So we'll start first by doing the machine sewing, and then we'll come back and I'll show you how to hand sew one. Okay. So my machine is already threaded and ready to go. So I'm just going to start by lining up where I want to start and going from there. I do find it best to work with a zigzag stitch on my machine. That's a number 5. And the wider the better. I'm actually going to use 4 because it's a little wider and it's a little longer, so it doesn't use quite as many stitches. The machine needles really do not like these patches, so I also find it easiest to sew right at the edge versus trying to go into the middle. So I'm going to zigzag into the edge, into the vest, into the edge, into the vest. Right. So I'm lining the patch up right about the middle of my sewing foot, so it'll zigzag back and forth over top. Always backstitch when you begin a sewing project. Follow along the patch. Now you don't have to be too perfect on this because when you look from afar you can't really tell. When I get to a corner or a space I need to turn, I put my needle in, I lift my foot, and I turn. And now I've gotten to the point where the patch is not going to move on me, so I can remove my pin. And I put the foot back down, pull up the needle, and go down the edge of the flag. Again, put my needle in, foot up, and turn. And the last side. Always want to start with the needle in the upmost position, and your foot should always be down. End with another back stitch, and that patch is finished. So I'm going to pull it off. I'm going to cut my top threads here, and then flip it over and cut my bottom threads. Pull it off my machine. So here you can see I used a green thread so that if we ever do have to go through and rip it off, you can see the threads that you need to put your seam ripper into. It's a little bit harder when it's the same color like you do on the front, but you want that to match. So if I do a different color on the back, it's easy enough for me to go through and put my seam ripper right into the colored thread. Okay, when I have a batch of patches, so some that are next to each other like these two or the numbers, I actually go all the way around the entire thing and then go back and cover in the edges. So I'm going to go ahead and do that quick. I'm going to do both sets here, and I'll finish this bridge, and then we'll be done, and I'll do some hand sewing. Thread caught a little bit there, so I gotta move that. This one's a little bit trickier because it is thin, so it's gonna want to move on me. I'm actually gonna turn my pin around so it doesn't get stuck. Stuck again. Because it is so thin here, I'm going to go ahead and go up and down that side just to make sure I caught all the edges. Stuck under there. Again, I'm going to back stitch on that whole edge just to double check. And that's done. Now, because I did so many patches at once, you can see there's all these little loops and things. So obviously you need to go back through and cut all of those little pieces off. Do that. And you need to do that from the front and from the back. It over, snip all my bobbin threads. This one got kind of tangled into everybody, so I'm gonna pull it out. Having fingernails sometimes comes in handy with stuff like this. Now here, these are tight enough that I'm actually just going to go ahead and leave those three because they're right up against the fabric, so they're not going to get tangled on anything. And you don't see the back, so it doesn't matter. And those last two threads. And that part of her vest is finished. All right, I'm going to set up for hand sewing, and I'm actually going to sew on one of my own personal patches, so we'll be back in just a minute. Okay, so this is my vest. It's dark blue because it's an adult vest, and I'm going to put on our Honor Troop patch because my troop has made honor troop. Both of my troops actually have done honor troop. So that's the one I'm going to put on here. It does look off center because these are off center because I know that I'm going to get more of them. So I left space for those. I have threaded my needle with blue thread so it matches my vest. I've tied a knot at the end. Okay. And how I like to start is I'll start from the back side. Right around the edge of whatever I'm working on. And I put my needle in and out, still on the back side. And I'm actually going to put my needle through the loop that my thread makes with that knot. And that just makes sure that the knot won't go through the fabric, because sometimes the knot is not quite big enough and so it'll go through a fabric hole. So this way it won't go through because it's been tied into the thread. So I am going to put my needle back through. So now I'm going to be working just from the front and flip it back over. I'm going to open my vest up so that I know I don't catch any other pieces of my vest that I don't want to catch. All right, so sewing by hand is a lot harder in many ways. It is easier because you don't have to have additional equipment, but it takes a lot more work. And these patches are really not needle friendly, especially since they've tried to make them iron-on, but as many of us have found out, the iron-on just does not always work. So you will have to use quite a good bit of force, but it is doable. I find going as close to the edge as possible is ideal. This one is actually embroidered, so it would be really easy to just kind of go through some of the threads versus going through the patch. I'm not going to do that because I want to show you how to do it through the patch. But so I am going to do a zigzag stitch just like I did on my machine, only I'm just going to do it by hand. So I have to get my hand underneath the fabric a little bit here. And I'm going to go into the patch, and I'm going to come back out past the patch. See how my needle is coming out past the patch, so it's coming out into the vest. And I'm just going to do that all the way around. Now I am going to try to get a little bit closer to the edge of my patch when I come out of my vest, because that one was a little far out. And that's just a matter of preference because I like it to look a little bit neater. As you can see, things get tangled and whatnot. I'm definitely a fan of sewing by machine. But this is a way to do it, especially this is easy for if you're sitting and watching a basketball game, or your brother's playing football and you're there supporting him, or you're there supporting another Girl Scout sister watching her play soccer or something of that sort. This is something that you could do, bring along to keep your hands busy while you work. You could just bring your needle, your thread, your vest, and whatever patches that you want to work on, and you can just sew along as you're sitting there. This is something that Girl Scouts should be doing on their own, especially by junior year. It's not something that the mom should be doing, because we want the girls to take responsibility for everything. So girls, you should be learning this skill. If there's interest, when we all can get back together, I can actually do an in-person workshop to kind of give you a hand and get some hands on to things, if there's enough interest for that. And we can even try to bring in a few machines if people want to try that out and see if that's something you're interested in before you go ahead and purchase. I'm just going to kind of whip this up real quick. You can see my thread keeps getting caught either on the pin, which I'm going to remove now because it's going to stay, but it also gets caught like in the patch, because the patch is kind of it's a harder material and it has some ridged edges on this fabric, so it likes to pull at the thread, so sometimes it stays a little uneven. It's fine. You just tug in until you figure out which one of the threads it is. better here. Of course, now I'm backwards. You can see as I'm going, it's pulling that edge right down. It does not look the same as the zigzag. You can see that there's nice straight lines, while this is kind of more of a curvy and it doesn't go back and forth per se. But it holds just as snugly as long as you do it right. And if you use the right colored thread, nobody's going to know the difference. So just use a thread that works with the vest. You could also use one that works with the patch itself if the patch has a lot. So in this one I probably could have used a brighter blue just so it matched the patch a little better, but that's okay. From afar you won't be able to see it. All right, I'm just going to go ahead and finish up with this around, and we'll come back to the video when I'm ready to tie off. Okay, so I've gone all the way around the patch, and I actually did it like I did the batch with the machine sewing, where I went right through the edge of the two as well. So I'm just going to finish these last couple of stitches, and then I'll show you how to tie off. Now, I find it easiest to work with less thread, which does mean that I end up tying off and restarting throughout this. So this actually took me 3 sets of thread. I do about an arm's span's worth of thread, and then fold it in half and tie my knot. So again, it makes it a little easier because there's less thread to tangle with, but it does mean that I have to tie off more often, and then I just restart the thread, and I can show you that when we go to the back. So I've gotten to the edge. You can see it is sewn all the way around here. So what I'm going to do is take my needle, put it back through the fabric, okay, right where it really won't be seen, and come back to the inside again. Okay, and this is harder to see because you can't use 2 different threads like you can with the needle or the machine. Sorry, my camera is slipping here. Okay. But you can see I went all the way around. You can see actually right here is where I did one swap out. Back over here, I did another swap. Okay. And this is where we started. So I'm actually just going to pinch a little teeny tiny piece of fabric, a little tiny bit, with my needle, go in and out, just like we did when we started to pull the knot. And see how it kind of makes a loop here. And my loop is a little uneven, so I'm just going to put my finger in it and pull my thread, and that evens out my loop. So it makes a loop. Now there are 2 different ways to do this, and I'm going to show you both, and I actually used both throughout this because neither of them makes a difference. So you can either go through the loop again, and pull tight. Okay, there's a knot, done. Or you can start the same way, and then you take the end of your thread instead of worrying about the loop, and you just go 1, 2, 3 around your needle. I just wrapped it around my needle. Okay, and again, pull through. Now this one, you do kind of want to keep your fingernail there and hold the threads so that it doesn't try to knot way up there. Okay, and pull tight. And you've got a knot, and that's really it. So again, this is something that's very easy to do when you're sitting and doing something else. Maybe you're watching TV, maybe you're watching a fellow sister Girl Scout doing soccer or cheerleading or a dance recital. Dance recital might be hard because it's dark, but different things that you can just sit and do this while you work. It's really quick and easy. Girls, you can all handle this. I promise you. If you are somebody who does ironing on, there are some people who have found luck. I am not one of those people. Again, the girls should really be doing that by the time they're juniors. At least by the time they're cadets, they should be doing it on their own. So teach them to do it. Have a leader teach them to do it however you want. But this is something the girls can very easily handle. That is it for sewing patches. If you have any questions, let me know.